In a column on Christmas, Garrison Keillor writes about one particular year. He says, "When I was 19, my older brother asked me to look after his house over Christmas so he and his young family could drive out to New York for a week. His house was in the woods, and I was intoxicated by Thoreau at the time, was more dramatic than necessary, and announced that I would spend Christmas alone out there to figure things out. A poem of mine got in the college literary magazine with the lines, "The ice is thin and deep is the dark. Below green lights in the trees and red, winding my way into the winter mist, coat open and the silver blades are sharp. And that long, long bend ahead will take me out and away from you and all of this." Which was about skating. But a girl I knew thought it was suicidal. And she came out to the woods to visit me and bring me dinner from her mother. Turkey, candied yams, cranberry, and tinfoil. We lit candles and sat and meditated on the mystery of life. And it was pleasant to have someone so concerned about my well-being. Well, I liked his particular story of a particular Christmas. And we all have particular stories about Christmas that we can tell to one another. Times when we connected, times when we were alone, times when things seemed hopeful and promising, and times when things weren't quite like that at all. And in the particularity of our stories, we have this overarching promise that comes to us through the Gospels. It is a promise that was highlighted in the readings that we read, that God knows about our particularities because of the truth of the incarnation. That in the midst of the very small stories of our life, there's a great big story that says that God is permanently engaged in what it means to be a human being. And because of that lasting connection to us, well, all of our lives have some potency and poignancy and meaning. Also in this column, Keillor would talk about his own mother's celebrations of Christmas. She was somehow a master at Christmas for their family. And this is how he puts it. "My mother loved Christmas with her whole heart, with 6 children and no credit cards, and my father ever watchful for unnecessary expense. Christmas was a mountain for grace to climb, requiring endurance, planning, stealth, and skill. But she brought it off to perfection every year until she was in her 90s, and then she coasted on her memories." Well, an apt description of an earlier time, and a description of the way he felt cared for by a particular person in his life, somebody who made real love because of how she treated the family over this particular celebration. I thought of that image. Christmas was a mountain to climb. And I think of many of you who climbed your own mountain to get here today. All the arrangements and preparations, family in different places, maybe celebrations you've already had, maybe celebrations you're not going to have this year. But there it all is, all in front of us, a chance to say to each other that we have encountered God in a very remarkable and particular way in the experience of Jesus Christ. In the early history of the church, there was a lot of conflict about what Jesus meant to the world. We have these scriptures, and the church relied on these scriptures, but they also wanted an easier solution. How do we say that Jesus is both God and man? How do we say that Jesus' will is both a will of a human being and a will of God, but it works together in perfect harmony? How do we say these things about what God has done? And the church said, we're just going to leave these hard questions out there. And we think of these things always together, both God and man. The one who is eternal, but he came into time. The one who reigns in heaven and yet knows what it means to be a human being. The hard question gets to stay hard, but the real comfort comes in the assurance that God knew what was happening and that God knows what's happening with us. Christmas celebrations have a way of expanding over time, and what's happened with the celebration of Christmas, I think, is remarkable. The tree, of course, never started out as a Christian symbol, but it was part of what happened during the season, and people were used to it, and so they claimed it. The candles, well, light has always been lit at this time of year to remind ourselves that the darkness and the short days are beginning to get to be long days. And yet we claim that symbol too. In a column by Connie Schultz, she talks about her own Christmas expansion. First, she gives a partial list of the holiday haul. The fake Christmas trees, the one in front of the window holds all the White House Historical Association ornaments. The larger one in the family room is laden with decades worth of handmade ornaments. It looks ridiculous, and I love it. The front door wreath, which requires my weighted D batteries to twinkle. We leave it there. And then this is the part I love. The small wooden creche from my childhood, boxed with the elves wearing striped pajamas and smiles of hysteria on their plastic faces. The elves originally arrived at our home in the 1960s, wrapped around bottles of dishwashing detergent. I keep thinking it was Lemon Fresh Joy because that's what Mom often used, but maybe I just like saying Lemon Fresh Joy. Anyway, Mom soon promoted the elves to stand sentry next to baby Jesus in the Made in Italy nativity scene that rested on top of our TV console. Only once did I ever suggest to Mom that elves were not in attendance at the birth of Jesus. "Oh, really?" she said as she looped the elves' arms and sat them cross-legged next to the three wise men. "And you were there, were you?" How does an 8-year-old argue with that? And so it's not a day we need to argue about what's been added to the celebration. It is a day that we need to trust that the one who has pursued us through all of history understands where we are now. And because he was full of grace and truth, we can be too.